According to a recent UN report by the Special Rapporteur for Iran, Ahmed Shahid, the human rights situation in Iran is getting worse. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I agree with the Special Rapporteur's report. After Mr. Rouhani came to power as president, we had the hope that the human rights situation would improve. Unfortunately, that did not happen. There have been more executions since he took over the helm. In the past 3 months, in fact, several political prisoners were executed. The freedom of expression has become even more restricted. In fact, when members of parliament in our country go to deliver speeches, they are stopped by pressure groups in the country. Then there is the incident of throwing acids on women who do not observe the hijab, Islamic dress, properly, but there have been no arrests of the culprits, and the culprits were related to the state. So there have been several such incidents post-Rouhani.
Compared to his predecessor, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, President Rouhani is seen by many to be more of a political moderate. So why is it that the human rights situation is deteriorating?
Based on the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the president of the country has very little authority. The authority, in the absolute sense, lies with the supreme leader. So even if Mr. Rouhani attempts to improve the domestic policies and the human rights situation, he will not be able to do so.
So what can be done to try and improve the situation? Does there need to be more international pressure? You've been an outspoken critic of sanctions on Iran because of the effect they have on the general public rather than the elite. If that isn't working, then what is the answer here?
I am against economic sanctions on Iran because economic sanctions merely make the public poorer, but they do not affect the state. However, I do agree with sanctions which weaken the government without harming the people. For instance, the Iranian government has 14 foreign language programs which it broadcasts via mainly European satellites for propaganda purposes. So please do not allow the Iranian government from using your satellites. Put sanctions on them. Cut off their loudspeakers by doing so. An example of such programs is Iran's Press TV, which is very active in the United Kingdom. And in fact, in one of their programs, they showed confessions of political prisoners, and these confessions were taken from them under duress. One of such confessions was one by an Iranian journalist, Mazyar Bahari, which led to a fine on Press TV by the UK government amounting to £100,000. So I repeat, please do not allow them to use your satellites. Plus the fact that the world public opinion seems to be focused on the ongoing nuclear talks, and people tend to forget that juveniles in Iran are being executed. They're in fact being executed in public. They seem to forget that there is widespread discrimination against ethnic and religious minorities, not to mention the women. So yes, of course, international pressure would be very helpful.
افرادی که کمتر از 18 سال مرتکب جرم شدن اینا رو اعدام میکنن.
You mentioned the nuclear talks there, so just to ask a question about that. I mean, do you think it's right for the world powers, for US, China, Russia, UK, France, Germany, to be talking to Iran and potentially signing a deal with Iran over its nuclear capabilities?
In principle, I am in favor of dialogue with the government of Iran. However, I don't think these dialogues should be exclusively focused on the nuclear program of the government, whereas the human rights is being neglected. That is my objection. I think that with the same intensity that you're engaging in talks on Iran's nuclear programs, you should also engage with them in talks on the human rights situation.